Hi, this is Little Dwarf playing games while rambling incoherently into a microphone. Why? Well, just because I can. And this time I'll be playing Gothic 3 modded. The main mods I installed were the quest pack and the content mod. I don't know that much about them. I never played with them, which is in fact one of the reasons I wanted to try this time, because I want to see what they bring to the table. But from what I understand, they are supposed to bring Gothic 3 a little bit closer in atmosphere and in feel to the previous Gothics 1 and 2, by, for example, adding additional armors to your companions to make them look like they did in Gothic 1 and 2, for example, but also they add new quests and generally expand upon the vanilla Gothic 3. I don't know if they are of good quality, but I just, I thought it couldn't hurt to try them out. I've heard generally good things about them, and even if they are bad, I guess at the very least I will see, I will see what they offer and I will form my own opinions, but also I suppose they will bring some fresh air to Gothic 3. I have a rather tumultuous relationship with Gothic 3, and I have rather mixed feelings about it as a game, and especially as a Gothic game, because I was, from the moment I played it, when it was first released, I was rather disappointed by it. It didn't feel like a Gothic game to me. It didn't feel like a proper continuation of Gothic 1 and 2 in terms of atmosphere, and generally I would consider it a letdown. And if I were to describe Gothic 3 in like one sentence or something, I would say, a very apt description can actually be found in Lord of the Rings, because this game feels like butter stretched over too much bread. Like, this game, I feel, was a victim of lofty ambitions of Piranha Bytes, the developers, because they wanted to include so much content in it that in the end the quality of the content suffered. This is a very wide game, but it's also very shallow, and in fact it's the exact opposite of how I like games being structured. But I said I have a tumultuous relationship and mixed feelings about this game, and yet I am also only talking about the negatives so far. The fact is that Gothic 3 for me is a little bit of a guilty pleasure, I guess. I don't really find myself that immersed in it when I play it, and yet for some reason, for some arcane unknown reason, I still kind of enjoy playing it from time to time. I enjoy walking around and killing the orcs by the hundreds. Maybe it's because of the music, because to be honest, if I were to point to a highlight of this game, it would definitely be the soundtrack. The soundtrack is unambiguously great. I like pretty much every track that exists in this game, and some of them I like so much that I actually casually listen to them outside of playing the game. So yeah, the soundtrack definitely adds a lot to the atmosphere as you traverse the world and whatever. So maybe that's why I like, walking around in it. Now, before I begin, two other two other points I would like to consider. First, I will try to put timestamps in the description, so you can skip the parts that you consider boring, for example, me just walking around or looting stuff, because there will be a lot of looting, and I will be doing the looting, so I will try to signify it in the timestamps so that you can skip it, because obviously it's not entirely riveting to watch, and I totally get that. And the second point is, I'm playing Gothic 3 with Polish dubbing and English subtitles and English commentary, partly because I want to maintain coherency with Gothic 1 and 2, where I also did that, and partly because I actually like the Polish dubbing for Gothic, even though it's significantly less true for Gothic 3 compared to Gothic 1 and 2. I feel like the Polish dubbing in Gothic 3 is significantly worse than it was in the previous ones, not least because a lot of the returning characters have had their voice actors change, and most of the time I think the new voice actors are actually worse than the previous ones in Gothic 1 and 2, you know, for the companions of the nameless hero, for example. But I just wanted to keep coherency with the previous games I played on the channel, so it will be Polish dubbing and English subtitles. If you consider that tedious for any reason, if you don't want to be reading the subtitles, then obviously just skip this. That's totally okay. So I guess that's enough talking for the intro. You know, plenty of that to come, because this is a very long game. Start with the alternative balancing. Sure, I'm not quite sure what the alternative balancing does, but you know, it was on by default, so let's try it.
Nawet bogowie nie wiedzą, co nas czeka w przyszłości.
Ty powrócisz, ale nie zaznasz spokoju.
Jeden człowiek odmienił losy wielu setek.
Ciemność przenika ziemię. Zło zatriumfuje. Dzielni towarzysze. Sam dokonasz wyboru.
Beliar wybrał mnie, a ja przejąłem całą jego moc.
Król przegra wojnę z orkami.
Co tu się dzieje? Mam naprawdę niedobre przeczucia. Cholera! Te ziemie będą należeć do orków po wsze czasy. Niedługo ostatnia mora schyli przede mną czoła, a ja, Khan, będę rządzić tymi ziemiami. To zwykłe robaki, które trzeba zdeptać. Oni w niczym nie przypominają wojowników Nordmaru, którzy zawsze walczyli z nami honorowo.
Teraz to my tu rządzimy.
Nic tu nie ma. Ruszajmy.
Naprawdę myślisz, że...
Cholera, co tu się dzieje? Mój królu, nadal nie ma wieści o statku, a orkowie stoją u wewnętrznego kręgu.
Więc nie mamy wyboru.
Alarm!
Walcz w imię Inosa i pokonaj sługi Beliara.
Myśmy nie mieli dość problemów.
Muszę się oddać.
Wiem, stary, wiem.
To była bydlęca skóra. Mura czaka. Co to ma wszystko znaczyć?
Wyglądasz na silną, Mora.
Cholera.
Xardas nakazał, aby wszystkie mory zaprowadzono na wykopaliska, a wy mi wyglądacie na mory. Opór jest bezcelowy.
Dobry ork to martwy ork.
Chodźmy zapolować na orków.
Brać ich!
Well, so Gothic 3, as you can see, opens you know, right in the middle of the action, as it were, which I don't entirely like, but I will elaborate a little bit more about that after the fighting is actually done, because it would be mightily embarrassing if I died in the tutorial, which is entirely possible if you're not careful. So I will try to deal with the orcs first and talk about the beginning of the game later, as I'm looting the houses of the people I presumably saved. They will eventually rue the moment I laid my foot down on the continent, but they don't yet know that, so let them rest easy in their ignorance for a moment. Now, the combat system in Gothic 3 is actually ridiculously bad. Like, it's actually fascinating to me how they could have made it worse in every regard compared to Gothic 1 and 2, because in reality it might not look like it at first, but in reality there was a surprising amount there was a surprising amount of depth in the combat in Gothic 1 and 2, like mostly 2, I guess, because the combinations of attacks were better developed. I will run after them, because even though you get the experience for the orcs that flee, you don't get their equipment, and their equipment happens to be quite valuable, so I would prefer to hunt them down to get it. They always have some pretty erratic movement patterns after they escape from a town you've reconquered, but it's generally I see it as worth it to hunt them down, specifically to rob them, you know, take their equipment and weapons, because obviously it's worth a lot. Okay, so now that I've dealt with them, let me get back to the topic at hand, which was combat. You know, the combat in Gothic 2 was actually kind of, well, I wouldn't say complex, but it was more complex than people give it credit for, I feel like. Because, for example, each enemy, each of the creatures, each monster had its own attack pattern that you could learn, and then you could dodge the attacks, or like, you know, or like counter them effectively if you knew what you were doing. And with the humanoid enemies, you could kill enemies that were far stronger than you if you utilized parrying correctly. And overall, you know, there was a lot of skill-based tactics that could be utilized in Gothic 2, whereas in Gothic 3 it's basically a button mashing simulator. Like, basically you win every combat by mashing left mouse button, you know, as fast as you can. They tried to fix it a little bit in the mod by making the enemies parry more. If you do not vary your attacks between strong and weak, they parry you after a while if you just button mash left mouse button without end. But they could only do so much with the base concept of the.
Tu jest napisane coś o alchemii.
Says something about alchemy. They could only do so much with the base concept of the combat, which is still pretty horrible, even after all of those, you know, all of those attempts at upgrading it. I will be continuing my approach from Gothic 2, which is basically to assume that the nameless hero has suffered some kind of a catastrophic brain damage, which led him to develop a psychotic personality disorder. So basically I will be stealing everything that isn't nailed down, and I will be generally unpleasant while trying to maximize my own profit, because I feel like on a repeated playthrough that's probably the most fun, and it allows you to see the greatest part of the game as far as actual content is concerned. Yeah, so basically I will be a bit of a jerk and I will rob everyone. Nothing important here, apparently. So, let me talk a little bit about the intro, because I already let you know, kind of, that I don't like it, and I really don't, because I feel like it being, you know, straight up button mashing action battle simulator kind of sets the tone for the entirety of Gothic 3, and it isn't a particularly good tone, because I feel like the way Gothic 3 opens doesn't really give you a chance to connect with the world and to immerse yourself in the story. You're just kind of thrown into deep water with the fight against the orcs, but there is no context to that, and thus I feel like it doesn't have the weight it could have, because basically you have no actual information about what the situation is. You know, you presume that humans have lost the war, but besides that, you don't really know why the orcs are enslaving everyone. For example, there was never any talk about it in Gothic 1 and 2. The orcs just wanted to kill everyone, mostly. For example, there is also no explanation of why the orcs look different, and why do they seem more sophisticated with actual, you know, using actual ornate cloaks and, you know, ornate clothes and whatever. So I feel like they could have done that better, even keeping the actual starting point of Ardea. They still could have framed that differently to better showcase the situation and to better introduce you into the world. I imagine something along the lines of landing away from Ardea and then slowly approaching it and, you know, mixing in with the populace, as it were, and learning more about how the life is under the orc occupation, and, you know, what the citizens feel about it and whatever, and basically what are the orc goals and how do they treat the humans that they conquered, and then you could slowly get introduced in... Freak. I didn't really want to talk to him. I did that by accident, but I guess let's ask him what his plans are. Presumably they are concerned with getting his revenge against King Robar. Yeah, I go to the capital city. Yeah, so I feel like the opening of Gothic 3 could have been a lot slower, and it would actually be good for the game, because compare the opening to Gothic 3 to the opening to Gothic 1. In Gothic 1, you get hit in the face by bullet, but then you meet Diego, and he sort of slowly introduces you into the world, and then you get your bearings on your way to the old camp. Slowly getting acquaintance with how the colony looks and what's the lay of the land, as it were, and I feel like that's a much more effective and much more interesting way to start a game.
Na początku krainę tę zamieszkiwali koczownicy i wieczny wędrowiec wskazał im drogę.
I do like those little lore books that the protagonist reads aloud. Yeah, but I'm not a fan of the opening of Gothic 3. In fact, as I said, it seems to set the tone for the entirety of the adventure, which is really combat heavy. Like, there was always a lot of combat in Gothic, but I feel like Gothic 3 is kind of overkill at some points. Like, you literally slaughter whole cities, like, at once. But basically, you waltz into the cities taken over by orcs, and you kill everyone in them. Like, and that happens multiple times throughout the game. So I feel like that's a little bit ridiculous, actually, and I find it difficult to treat it seriously after a while. Like, I know they were trying to go for like an epic quest to free Mertana from the orcs, although I guess in this playthrough the people of Mertana are going to be unpleasantly surprised by my shifting allegiances, but generally I feel like it didn't really work, and overall this game can be really tedious at some points, but oh well. I guess at the very least I'm kind of curious to see what the mods will bring to the table, because I've already seen some changes, and some pretty significant changes at that, namely in the form of my old companions being here, because in the vanilla Gothic 3 there were only a couple of them. There was Diego, Milten, Lares and Gorn. That arrived with you, but obviously you met other characters later on, so it didn't make sense that they weren't here, because that was the only point where they could have arrived. So it's good to see them here. I saw, for example, Lee and Lares and Wolf, the mercenaries. So it's good to see them, and each of them also has their iconic armor, which seems to be rendered quite nicely. It's definitely very reminiscent of the original designs from Gothic 1 and 2, but it also tries to stay kind of true to the overall graphic design of Gothic 3. And I definitely do appreciate that. I will take a closer look at all of them a little bit later on. To be honest, I didn't really even want to talk with Lee. I did that kind of by accident. I think the smithy is the last building I'm supposed to rob, besides the town hall. But as far as the town hall is concerned, the chief, the village elder, is going to talk to me when I approach him. So that's why I was that's why I was avoiding him, because I wanted to finish robbing his people before actually talking with him. Okay, let me actually save. Would be pretty unfortunate if I somehow died and then had to restart the entirety of the prologue as a result. So, having robbed everyone blind,
Co zrobiłeś? Orkowie pozwoliliby nam żyć.
Interesting that he didn't have lines, because he did have actual voice lines in the vanilla game, referring to the fact that now Xardas will send more of the orcs to harass them, and that he needs protection from the rebels. So I'm not quite sure why did the mod developers not use those lines.
Ciebie to nie obchodzi.
W końcu i tak cię do tego zmuszą.
Po prostu przestań kombinować.
Tak, pewnie. Miło się z tobą gadało.
Pomyślę o tym.
Tak, pewnie. Miło się z tobą gadało.
Lepiej się nie wtrącaj.
Przestań. I tak jest już źle.
Może lepiej nie zwalaj tego na innych.
Przestań. I tak jest już źle.
Lepiej się nie wtrącaj.
Okay, that's interesting, and I guess kind of cool, because I guess they added a new character to the village, who's like a rebel,
Ci radzę.
and he knows where to find the rebel hideout of Redok, because in vanilla it was actually Gorn who took you there, which didn't make a lick of sense, because Gorn obviously was only on the mainland as long as you were, which was a couple of hours maybe, you know, and he only just took part in retaking Ardea from the orcs, so how could he have known where to find the rebels? He was basically a newcomer, a total newcomer to the continent, so I guess that's nice that the developers of the mod thought about that discrepancy and tried to alleviate it.
Nie mam z tym problemu.
Dobrze ci radzę.
Hej, co chcesz usłyszeć? To wciąż ta sama historia.
Jeśli będziesz się tak dalej zachowywać, nigdy tego nie załatwimy.
W końcu i tak cię do tego zmuszą.
Po prostu przestań kombinować.
Lepiej uważaj, co mówisz.
Może lepiej nie zwalaj tego na
So apparently the mod developers answer to how did the nameless hero become
Wiele ci zawdzięczamy.
so weak during the journey from Corinis is that he doesn't like fish, so he's malnourished.
Wciąż ta sama historia.
I guess it's as good as an answer as any, which is not that good, but no.
Pewnie.
To be honest, there's only so much you can do with the setup. Like, it's a bit of a, you know, it requires quite a lot of suspension of disbelief.
Wciąż ta sama historia.
Już to wiem.
He already knows that, apparently. The entire thing requires quite a lot of suspension of disbelief, but you know, what can you do? Like, obviously they couldn't have had you start like a demigod decimating everything, because that just wouldn't be fun from a gameplay perspective. Well, let's talk to all of my friends.
Tak jest już źle.
You can see them wearing their respective armors from Gothic 2. Gorn, for example, has a Dragon Hunter armor, which is rendered quite nicely. Diego has a Shadow armor, and obviously Milten just wears a Fire Mage robe, which I don't remember if this is the original one from Vanilla Gothic 3, or is it also modified to resemble more the one that was used on the continent. Well,
Nie lubię orków. Nic na to nie poradzę. Co się dzieje z Lesterem? Miał sprowadzić posiłki. Już dalej nie mogę. Wszystko jest możliwe. Czekam i popatrzę. Z tego będzie jeszcze więcej kłopotów. Lepiej zważaj na słowo.
Do zobaczenia.
Znów wpakowaliśmy się w kłopoty.
Co tu się stało?
Najwyraźniej orkowie wygrali wojnę z królem Robarem. A teraz przewalają się jak fala przez tę ziemię, zniewalając ludzi. Ale przede wszystkim chciałbym się dowiedzieć, co się stało z Lesterem. Uważaj na siebie.
Jak za starych czasów, co? Ci orkowie nie byli tacy twardzi. Pewnie zdarzają się twardsi. Co z Lesterem? Chyba miał sprowadzić posiłki. Teraz rozmawiamy. Przyjdź później.
Moje runy straciły moc. Nie sądzę, aby z pozostałymi magami ognia było inaczej. Wyruszę w podróż, aby nauczyć się
Będziesz się
prawdziwej,
tak dalej
prastarej
zachowywać,
magii.
nigdy czego nie załatwimy.
Przed powstaniem run tylko nieliczne, niezwykle potężne istoty karały się magii. Ta wiedza musiała zostać gdzieś zachowana. I to właśnie jej należy uczyć.
Nie zwalaj tego.
Powodzenia!
Dziękuję. Jeszcze się spotkamy. Sam mógłbym ci to powiedzieć.
Żartujesz sobie?
Wszystko jest możliwe.
Pomyślę o tym.
Powinien być mądrzejszy.
Naprawdę myślisz, że...
Dobrze ci radzę.
Lepiej uważaj, co mówisz.
Żartujesz sobie?
Powinien być mądrzejszy.
Gdyby to było takie łatwe.
Z tego będzie jeszcze więcej kłopotów.
Pomyślę o tym.
okay, this is a very nice touch, because I feel like I know where this is going. You see, in the Vanilla Gothic 3, there were dragons, but they were never addressed. They were like random mobs, basically, that you could kill. And nothing significant happened with them, which seemed pretty weird after dragons being such a crucial plot point in Gothic 2. So I guess this is trying to address it. This is trying to link it with that quest from Gothic 2, where the lizardmen were delivering the dragon eggs to, you know, help the dragon kind proliferate and survive. So I really like that. It shows a lot of like actual thought from the developers of the mod, because they took something that was already in Vanilla Gothic 3 and didn't make sense, and they linked it with the events from Gothic 2, thus creating, you know, a coherent narrative structure. So I definitely enjoy that. I will pretend I don't remember what happened because it's more fun that way, and it's more, it's more fitting towards my brain-damaged psychopath persona.
Dobrze ci radzę.
Powinien być mądrzejszy.
Jasne, czemu nie?
Lepiej uważaj, co mówisz.
Pomyślę o tym.
Jakbyśmy nie mieli dość problemów.
Może lepiej nie zwalaj tego na innych. Lepiej się nie wtrącaj.
Z tego będzie jeszcze więcej.
Żartujesz sobie?
Gorzej już być nie może.
Jasne, czemu nie?
Wiem, stary, wiem.
Jeśli będziesz się tak dalej zachowywać, nigdy tego nie załatwimy.
Sam mógłbym ci to powiedzieć.
Może lepiej nie zwalaj tego na innych.
Lepiej uważaj, co mówisz.
Ciebie to nie obchodzi.
Jakbyśmy nie mieli dość problemów.
Jasne, czemu nie?
Gorzej już być nie może.
Żartujesz sobie?
Wiem, stary, wiem.
Jasne, czemu nie?
Niektóre problemy same się rozwiązują.
Żartujesz sobie?
Powinien być mądrzejszy.
Po prostu przestań kombinować.
Sam mógłbym ci to powiedzieć.
Żartujesz sobie?
Powinien być mądrzejszy.
Jasne, czemu nie?
Gorzej już być nie może.
Może lepiej nie zwalaj tego na innych.
Co się stało?
Idź szukać statku! Wątpię, czy go znajdziesz.
Co?
Piraci! W mgnieniu oka było po wszystkim.
To be honest, I've always found the plot point about the pirates stealing Esmeralda to be really contrived, because, not only does it seem impossible to me that the crew left it totally unattended, but also, more importantly, it would be impossible to steal such a large ship so quickly, and it would require a lot of men, which would mean that the pirates would have to have their own ship, and obviously it would be impossible then not to see them approaching. So I'm not a fan of that, but on the other hand, again, all of my equipment was there, so if the ship stayed, they would still have to find some way of explaining why don't I have all of the powerful artifacts I had in Gothic 2. So, it's a bit of a lose-lose situation if you're the developers of the game, so...
Co z naszym wyposażeniem?
A jak sądzisz? Musimy zdobyć nowy ekwipunek. Porozmawiaj z Diego.
Lepiej uważaj,
Niewiele
co
jest rzeczy, których nie potrafi załatwić.
Dobrze ci radzę.
Niektóre problemy same się rozwiązują.
Po prostu przestań kombinować.
Z tego będzie jeszcze więcej kłopotów.
Ej, trudno powiedzieć. To ta sama stara śpiewka.
Jasne, czemu nie?
Co teraz zrobisz?
Spróbuję się jakoś
Sam
dostać
mógłbym
na
się
południe.
dowiedzieć. Ale chyba się jeszcze spotkamy.
Tak sądzę.
Po prostu.
Co tam?
Piraci.
Te dranie zwiały z naszym skarbem.
Na to wygląda.
Obawiam się, że tym możemy się zająć dopiero później. Widzisz, mamy pewien problem.
Jaki problem?
Ej, trudno powiedzieć. To ta sama stara śpiewka.
I already did talk with the village elder.
Pogadamy później.
The rendition of the novice armor is very cool as well. I am definitely digging the armors and how reminiscent they are of Gothic 1 and 2.
Uważaj na siebie.
Apparently he doesn't want to
Diego
talk to me.
wzmocnuje plany. Może powinieneś z nim pogadać.
Yeah, the problem is he
Napiję się.
doesn't want to talk to me,
Do zobaczenia.
and neither does he. So I guess I have to talk with that Tristan guy, the rebel. What about you, Cor Angar?
Nie wierzę w ani jedno słowo.
Powinien być mądrzejszy.
Uważaj na siebie.
I can ask Lares if he has stolen anything, which is hilarious because I did. Like, I literally robbed everyone in this place already.
Najpierw mała przerwa.
Porozmawiamy później.
Okay, let's look for that Tristan guy. So obviously he's the one who has information about the rebels, and nobody else wants to talk to me anymore, so, you know, it's probably a clue regarding the fact that I should look for him specifically. Okay, I think that's him. Well. He said he's looking for his equipment, so maybe that's a quest later on to help him find it.
Uważaj na siebie.
Okay. He told me he will take me to Redok, but no option exists to actually ask him to do it. So presumably I need to talk with the others once again before that option sort of manifests.
Tak wiele ci zawdzięczamy.
Nie mieli dość problemów.
Do zobaczenia.
Uważaj na siebie.
Właśnie rozmawialiśmy.
Well, Diego wanted to talk to me before.
Uważaj, co mówisz. Hej, co chcesz usłyszeć? To wciąż ta sama historia.
Okay, something is broken because the subtitles are not visible. Okay, the game actually freezed on me, which is not a great sign with regards to my future endeavors with this game, but let's try talking with Diego again.
I co proponujesz?
Najpierw musimy ogarnąć ten bałagan, którego narobili orkowie. Jeden z nas musi się dowiedzieć, gdzie ukrywa się Xardas.
Przestań. I tak jest już źle.
Chyba powinieneś się zająć Xardasem.
Powinien być mądrzejszy.
Co planujesz?
Znasz mnie. Jestem wszędzie, gdzie nadarza się jakaś
Nie mam
okazja.
z tym problemu.
Teraz Myrtana to terytorium orków. To nie znaczy, że będę się im podlizywał. Wyruszę na południe. Na pustyni na pewno czeka jeszcze nie jedna
Nie
okazja.
przykładałbym do tego żadnej uwagi.
Skąd weźmiemy nowy ekwipunek?
Wiesz, jak to działa. Bierz, co tylko zdołasz. I nie pozwól, żeby ktokolwiek ci to zabrał. A ponieważ orkowie są teraz władcami Myrtany, na pewno zdobędziemy od
I
nich
tak cię
dobry
do tego
ekwipunek.
zmuszą.
Take that which belongs to others. Yeah, I've already started. I hereby start with you. Wow, that's pretty cold, but it's actually perfect for this iteration of the Nameless Hero. So fork over your stuff, Diego.
Nie wierzę w ani jedno słowo. A z tego będzie jeszcze więcej kłopotów. Daj spokój. Powinien być mądrzejszy.
He didn't mean that, but it's too late for that.
Poczekam i popatrzę.
Sam mógłbym ci to powiedzieć.
Tak, pewnie. Miło się z tobą gadało. W końcu i tak cię do tego zmuszą.
Niektóre problemy same się rozwiązują.
To be honest, he does have a point. It was mightily stupid to disembark without any armor, and this is probably the most contrived plot point because it literally doesn't make sense. Like I could let them go with regards to leaving Esmeralda unattended. After all, the crew was pretty small for such a large ship, so maybe they just all left and like they were like, we're here and on the mainland, let's just get on with it. But the Nameless Hero didn't take any armor with him, like whatsoever. That's kind of stupid, isn't it?
Nie mieli dość problemów.
Ta, pewnie. Miło się z tobą gadało. Powinien być mądrzejszy. Nie wierzę w ani jedno słowo. Naprawdę myślisz, że... Daj spokój. Lepiej uważaj, co mówisz.
They would fall on their knees because of their awe. Sure, let's go with that. They would be amazed by the power of my member.
Najpierw mała przerwa.
So, apparently he gave me his old shadow armor, which isn't too great, but it's better than nothing, and it looks really cool. I will also equip this beaten wooden shield.
Do zobaczenia.
Co teraz zamierzasz?
Pójdę poszukać buntowników. Założę się, że część nadal żyje.
Uważaj na siebie.
Okay, so I guess at this point
Tak wiele ci zawdzięczamy.
I'm supposed to talk with that
Z tobą gadało.
Tristan guy again, so that he can take me to Redok. That is a nice armor you're wearing. But what is that scroll? I pointed his pocket. Okay, let's ask this.
W końcu i tak cię do tego zmuszą. Daj spokój. Wiem, człowieku, wiem. Nie słuchałbym tego. Naprawdę myślisz, że... W końcu i tak cię do tego zmuszą. Wszystko jest możliwe. Nie wierzę w ani jedno słowo.
Okay, that's that definitely seems important. Those are some legendary camera angles. I've had a lot of problems with those in Gothic 1 and 2, so it's nice to see them return. They are almost nostalgic to me at this point.
To ta sama stara śpiewka. Powinien był wiedzieć. Daj spokój. Wszystko jest możliwe. Nie słuchałbym tego. Powinien był wiedzieć. Ej, co mam powiedzieć? To ta sama stara śpiewka.
Okay, orders Ardea. I will read that shortly.
No nic mi nie przeszkadza.
That is an interesting armor you're wearing.
Nie wierzę w ani jedno słowo.
Ah, I guess it does look similar to the crawler plate armor.
Czekam i popatrz. Powinien był wiedzieć. Daj spokój. Sam mógłbym ci to powiedzieć.
Okay, before I go to Redok, let's read those orders that he took from the orc officer. Conquer the eastern bank. To all leaders of the orcish horde, the humans on the mainland are weak, but not all humans will kneel down before you without resistance. Some experienced fighters of Innos will come across the sea. They call your reign in question. Your elite warriors proved several times to deal with the human army, but these fighters are stronger and more determined because they are guided by a god. Because of that, I request of you, secure all areas on the eastern bank. No city, no farm, no forest should stay under human control. Bestow upon the sailors no reason for hope. Xardas. Oh, I guess he was anticipating me coming. And he wanted the orcs to prepare. Now, I don't think I will go to Redok yet, because I want to check that little hut from where Lester came from. In vanilla, I am pretty sure he always stayed there, and you had to go to look for him.
Pogadamy później. Uważaj na siebie. Umieram z głodu.
But I also wanted to briefly comment on the mod additions, because I would say my first impressions of the mods are definitely positive. Like, obviously, the English translation for the additional voice lines is pretty weak. It's obvious that English was not the first language of the people who wrote those lines. I presume they were presumably originally German, because obviously Gothic is a German game, and I would presume it has a very strong modding community in German, although, I mean in Germany, but I guess it also has a very strong modding community in Poland and in Russia, so it could have been either of those originally, but what I wanted to say is that it's clear it was not English. But besides that, I definitely do enjoy a lot of the additions already, especially the armors. The armors actually look very nice and strike a nice balance between the graphic style of Gothic 3 and the fidelity to the art design of Gothic 1 and 2. But also in terms of the actual added content such as quests, I can already see quite a lot of foresight on the part of the developers, and I do appreciate that, because for example them changing Gorn leading you to the rebels to that new character Tristan actually makes a lot of sense. It makes so much sense that it should have been done originally, because Gorn knowing where to find them is nonsense. So I do appreciate that, and how they tied the dragons from Gothic 2 to the dragons in Gothic 3 is also pretty great, because it shows that they really thought about it a little, and they took an element from Gothic 3 that was already there in vanilla but just didn't make sense, and they linked it with backstory from Gothic 2, so that both of those elements came out strengthened in the end, because there was a plot point in Gothic 2 where the lizard men tried to save the dragon species by carrying out dragon eggs forth, so that more dragons can hatch, and I guess in a way it's sort of their plan is revealed to have come into fruition eventually here. So I do definitely appreciate that. I was running in circles for a moment because I wanted to finish that point before I ended the episode. I will explore this little hut and talk with the people here next time. For now, let me save and actually end it here. That's all for this one, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.